So are you ready for some marketing fire? Vince Warnock is an award-winning business and marketing strategist, coach, author, and host of the Chasing the Insights podcast. An ex-radio announcer with over 20 years in marketing, Vince was previously the chief marketing officer at Cigna and has founded multiple companies, including the Chasing the Insights Academy, where he empowers entrepreneurs and business owners to make sense of marketing and grow the business they have always dreamt of. Thank you so much, Vince, for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Stephanie. It's such a pleasure.
I'm excited to dive in because I know we've spoken before. I was on your podcast and I was just so excited and thrilled to have you be part of this show, be part of the summit, because I want to know your history. I want to hear all about where did you start? When was the first time you became an entrepreneur? You obviously spent a lot of years in corporate with Cigna. Tell us a little bit about you.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, first of all, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I have to start it that way, being a giant Star Wars nerd. But I've had a very long career in both corporate and entrepreneurship. So I kind of go in and out of both of those. But my first ever entrepreneurial endeavor was age 11. So in context for people, this is the not so nice part of my story, but I grew up in a very abusive household. I just grew up in a not very nice environment, we'll put it that way, and also grew up in poverty. And at age 7, my parents decided that they had too many kids. So I had 5 sisters and a brother in basically a 3-bedroom place. So my dad found this old caravan, he put it on the back section, he threw me out in there. That's where I was going to live, with no insulation and no power, which is not healthy in the middle of winter when you'd wake up and you'd be ice on your chest and all this kind of stuff. So I decided I needed to survive. I need to go into survival mode. So I got to be really resourceful. First thing I did was middle of the night, digging a little trench and then covering it over, digging in a little trench and putting wires underneath the caravan all the way under the house and actually tap into their mains. So that way I actually had some power to my caravan. Then I had to black out the windows so they couldn't see that I actually have a heater and a lamp and all this kind of stuff that I managed to acquire. So I got resourceful in that way. But I still remember when I was 10 years old, my dad, he was a rubbish truck driver. So he would go and do commercial rubbish for companies. And there was a large technology company here. This is way back. And they had imported some of the first ever personal computers. And these were the Sinclair ZX81s. So these are little devices. They were terrible little computers. They had rubber membranes, like rubber keys, and they would always fail. But they had bought these things and 3 of them didn't work. So tax write-off, they throw them in the bin. My dad just goes, no idea what these are, but the boy likes pushing buttons. So I'll go and give them to him. Gave them to me and I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got my hands on a personal computer. So I realized they didn't work, pulled them apart. This is at age 10, pulled them apart, fixed them, put them back together. And then I ended up with, I only got 2 of them working. So I ended up with these 2 Sinclair ZX81s. Went to school, told everyone about it, and I had my heart set on a specific device. I wanted the Commodore 64, the greatest personal computer built at that time. It was glorious. But some of my friends were like, oh, we really want that computer. And I said, well, I'll sell it to you. So I worked out how much I needed for the 64. I could sell these 2 Sinclair ZX81s and buy a 64. Nice and simple. So age 11, I'm at this intermediate school. I've got this Commodore 64. I had to sneak into the house where my parents were at work and use it on the TV there so I could actually use the thing. And then I discovered that all of the software and all of the games that you could buy for a Commodore 64 were all on cassette tape. Now, please do not judge me. I had no moral compass when I was a kid. My father was a very corrupt man. He was a very abusive man. So I had no moral compass there. But I decided I could make money off this. So I used to go and buy a whole pile of blank cassette tapes. I would go down to one of the department stores where they had like tape decks with high-speed dubbing on, for those that can remember tapes. My mate would distract the guy behind the counter and I would just copy all these games and all of these pieces of software and I would sell them at school. And then I'd hire them we had a local service that would come around and for $1 you could hire a game for a week. So I'd buy that and then I'd sell 20 copies of that game for $1 each. So I started making really, really good money off that. Bought myself a TV, a VHS, VCR type thing. I bought myself some heaters, bought myself a whole pile of stuff. And I learned to thrive in the midst of being in this environment through being resourceful and making my own money. And that's when I learned you could create your own wealth. Now, every business I've had since then, just to be clear, has been above board and legit. That was my last corrupt kind of company that I ever did. And the statute of limitations I've worked out are long overdue. So we're okay there. But that kind of started this passion for being able to create my own wealth. And so I went through many different jobs. I trained as an electronics and computer engineer, and then software engineer. Got bored with all of those. Realized that people were where I was really passionate about. And then also worked on radio as a radio announcer on one of our top radio stations here for a number of years. And then found all of these things converged to a natural kind of transition. So I was working in labs with a lab coat, designing electronic circuitry, but then I was managing people, then I was on radio and I was entertaining. And I'm like, wait a minute, all of this technically is marketing. You combine technology with people's behavior, with entertainment. It's like, this is the natural convergence. So I found myself in marketing accidentally, created a number of businesses in the early days that failed miserably because I had no idea what I'm doing. But then finally worked up to creating a company called Common Ledger, which was my biggest ever acquisition. So created that with a co-founder, and over 3.5 years, we built that up to an 8-figure exit, and left there exhausted, burnt out completely, but very happy with my bank account. And then got to join the team at Cigna and became the chief marketing officer there, which for 5 years on paper was amazing. Like, it was a really good job, don't get me wrong. They pay a ridiculous amount of money. Like, it was obscene the amount you get paid there. But at the same time, I'm looking at it going, on paper, I should be loving this job. I was getting the results. We doubled the revenue of the company in the 5 years I was there, took them from 7th to 2nd largest insurer. Online sales, the thing that everyone said you can't do, Vince, no one buys medical or life insurance online. I went, I'm a marketer, hold my beer, I've got this. So I turned their online sales channel from nothing to almost half the revenue, which was staggering. Wow. So I was getting all the accolades. I was getting the results. I was getting noticed. I published my first book when I was there. And then I started winning all the awards, including getting recognized by Adobe as one of the top 50 marketers in the world, which was huge and very humbling experience. Except all of this on paper, like I said, was amazing. And yet I'm sitting in my really fancy office, miserable as hell, and really unfulfilled and feeling unhappy. And that led me to make the easiest hard decision of my life, which was to move on from there. I remember having conversations, November, December 2019, started talking to the CEO going, I think my time's done here. And she's like, no, it's not. And I'm like, well, I think I need to move on. No, you can't move on. And she goes, she keeps saying to me, do you know how much we pay you? And I'm like, yeah, I know how much you pay me. It's not about the money. I don't understand, Vince. And that's part of why I'm leaving. So it was a really easy, hard decision to move on from there. And the goal was just to be a full-time author. I was going to write my next book, which is all about imposter syndrome and dealing with that. Turns out I'm not that bright, because when I started writing that book, I realized having ADHD and focusing on one thing at one time is not going to be that's not good for your mental health. So I very quickly morphed that into multiple books, and then of course into launching my podcast, which has just grown so phenomenally, and then accidentally finding myself becoming a marketing coach. So taking the 20 plus, which is more like 30, but I don't like admitting that. So 20 plus years of marketing and growing companies and selling companies into helping other entrepreneurs to do the same. So it's been a crazy journey.
Yeah. Wow. So now when you look at your portfolio, you have author, you've got your coaching. What else is included in those streams of income that make the life that you now lead and are enjoying, right?
Yeah, absolutely loving. Honestly, I still remember my first kind of intake of clients, and they all came to me going, hey, you got time on your hands now. You're not at Cigna. We need your help. But of course, then also the pandemic hit, and a whole pile of people I was interviewing for my book went, hey, we really need your help now. So seeing them turn around, I had this weird kind of bubbly feeling on the inside, Stephanie. I couldn't quite describe it. And I was like, what is this feeling? I don't know what it is. Is it indigestion? Turns out it was being fulfilled. So I was just feeling great. And I still remember, so embarrassing, when I launched my first group program, I just got all this feedback from people about the wins that they were getting. I went and picked my wife up from work, and I'm waiting outside her work in the car. And I'm listening to these voice messages from people just going, Vince, you have no idea how much more confident I am now, and just really want to honor you and thank you. And oh my goodness, I just made my first big sale. And somebody else going, oh, I've just broken through in this area. And I'm sitting there, tears streaming down my face. I'm so proud of my students. I'm so proud of these people. They've become like family. I was feeling amazing. Wife hops in the car and she goes, what's going on? She just looks at me going, you moron. I'm going, listen to these. And I was playing the message to her, and she goes, oh, that's cute. She goes, I just saved 2 people's lives today. And I went, Yeah, okay, you win. She's an addictions counselor that deals with people at the lowest of their lows. So she's
Yeah,
really at
yeah.
that front line of helping people. So yeah. But yeah, so it's for me, one of the things, and this is what I taught my kids as well, Stephanie, is this is why I can transition from corporate to entrepreneurship quite well, is I never want to be beholden to a job. And by that, I mean, I saw the damage that this did to my family with my dad. He was always like, he was a very unionized man. He would, he would work in a job until basically he got too injured or too ill or whatever and had to move to another job, or that they made him redundant, and they would fight that. And it was always me versus the man and all this kind of thing. And I was like, we should be able to create our own wealth. I did it at age 11. We should be able to not be beholden to whether or not we've got job security. And half the world, in fact, most of the world would have seen this in 2020. Where the jobs that we all thought were secure, the jobs that everyone thought were, hey, I have this sense of security, all of a sudden aren't there for you.
Right.
And I was really disappointed and really upset by some of the entrepreneurs out there that I hold in high regard, who were like, oh, COVID's hit. Oh, well, I've just bought my new jet. Well, if I affect my bottom line, then I can't really afford the jet. You know what? I'll just lay off 2/3 of my staff. So they go and lay off 2/3 of their staff, and they're like, sorry, everyone, no redundancy clause, nothing. You're basically out on your butts. But also when the pandemic's kind of finished and everything's back on the right track, come back and I'll hire you again. Like, why would you work for someone that doesn't have your back,
Right.
So for me, it was about creating my own wealth. So every corporate job I've had a side hustle. And even even now, my business is coaching. It's one-to-one coaching, and it's my group programs helping entrepreneurs. But I've always got a hustle on the side. I've got 2 books that are being published next week. I've got another book coming out in January, another one in February. So they're income streams for me. I've got my podcast. Obviously, everyone says you can't make money off podcasts. I call BS on that. So I worked out, and to me, it was like, okay, I don't want to go down the traditional route there. Everyone thinks, oh, you got a podcast, you have to have advertising, Vince, or maybe sponsorships. And I'm going, well, no, because I don't want to be aligned with, I don't want to say, hey, all of you should use Trello and be a sponsor of Trello or something, or have Trello sponsor me, if I didn't believe in that, or if I didn't think it was going to add value to people. And I didn't want people to question that integrity either. I wanted them to know that I'm going to give them honest answers to everything. So I don't even sign up for affiliate programs there, which shocks a lot of people. And I'm not against affiliate programs. That's just how I am. But I also knew that I need to make money off a podcast. Otherwise, it's just going to drain my time and I'm not going to enjoy it. So I knew I would use it to generate leads, which tick, it does the job perfectly. I knew it would work to position me as a thought leader. Again, tick, it does that perfectly. But also I set up the Insiders Club. I knew that there were going to be some hardcore fans who really like what I'm doing. So they will want to be able to pay for something. So I was like, what value can I add to them over and above them listening to the podcast? What can I do to make them feel like they're a VIP, that they're somehow a partner with the show? And the obvious thing was like do a Patreon or something like that. And I thought, well, I don't want to do that because I don't want to be aligned with Patreon. There's some dodgy crap going on there. So I just set up my own little thing called the Insiders Club. And they just basically pay $10 a month. So $10 a month, they get access to exclusive content. So I give them masterclasses I've done. I give them some behind the scenes. They get the video versions of all the podcasts, things like that as well, downloads and a pile more. And I just put that there, and I just talk about it in every show. And you launch it, you get 10 people sign up. You're like, oh, okay, so I'm making $100 a month. That's nothing. Then suddenly you've got 150 people signed up, and you're like, okay, so now that's just another revenue stream that's coming in that helps to support, helps me to grow the show so I can hire more people to do the marketing, hire more people to get out there and things, but also it provides me with additional revenue, which is really important.
That's awesome. So it leads me to the next question of how do you manage it all? And you mentioned hiring people. So at the level that you're at with the streams of income that you have, where do you have teams participating in that with you? What do you do yourself? How do you maintain, that time that you were wanting with family and all of that?
Yeah. I do far too much myself, actually, if I'm honest with you. I'm terrible at self-care. I keep getting told off. I've hired an accountability coach, not for making sure I'm working on the right things, all that kind of stuff, actually to make sure I'm not overworking. And we've set it up, they've got direct access to my wife and my son.
Wow.
So if I'm burning out at all, they're on a phone call teaming up on me. And I'm like, damn it. And I pay this person to pick on me. This is crazy.
Right.
I'm sure I'm a sadist. But the idea is because they worked out for me, writing is my happy place. Like I love writing. It's something I find really fulfilling. It's something I really enjoy. So then they're checking in on me. They're checking my word count. They got access to my documents. They check my word count on my novels, on my books that I'm writing, etc. And if I'm not hitting a certain word count, they know that I'm sacrificing because I'm overworking. So that's when it's honest conversation time. And I've learned to listen to those conversations. I've learned to listen to my wife when she walks up and goes, uh-oh, what have I done? And she goes, are you overdoing it? And I'm like, I have to stop. I have to think, and I have to go, you know what? I think I am. Okay, I'm going to take some time for myself. So that's a hard lesson. I'm still learning that all the way because I'm so passionate about what I do. I'm so like, I love this. I love the momentum of it, but I've got to be cautious because that can consume you if you're not careful. But for me, it also was about if I'm going to grow and I'm going to scale and I'm going to get that additional revenue, I need to not be doing it all myself because otherwise I'm the one in my own way. So hiring a team was really important. So first thing I did was hire a VA that could take care of some of the communication stuff that I need, do my email marketing, things like that. Went through a few different VAs at that point because it was like, it's hard to find the right one. But then I learned a really valid tip, by the way, which I give to all of you, is when you're interviewing VAs or designers or anyone else like that, it's a real temptation to go, I'm looking for this. Is that you? Yes. Are you capable of doing this? Yes. What I've discovered, because I'm part of a lot of VA Facebook groups where all the VAs are, I don't think they realize I'm in there. And half the time you see the VAs in there go, hey, I've just been asked if I can do this for a podcast. I've said yes. Does anyone know how to do it? I need to pick your brains. And I'm like, of course they say yes. They say yes to everything because they're looking for that work. That makes sense. I would do the same as if I was them. So instead of asking those kind of questions, what you would do is you want to find out in the interview how they think. So, for example, one of my top VAs, Marla, she is an absolute gem, and she's mine, so everyone back off. So she's amazing. But when I interviewed her, I said to her, look, I really need somebody to take care of this aspect of the business, right? So I'm doing all the podcast recordings, but I need somebody who can do the marketing of this and communicate with the speakers to make sure the timings are all right and all those kind of things, and to send them the assets that they need and help them share it on their networks, etc. I said, so I want to take the podcast from here, where it is now, to here. And I painted that picture with her. So I want to increase the marketing. I want to increase the invisibility. How would you go about doing that? Now, she's not a marketing expert, but you want to know how proactive and how outside the square they are. And she came back to me. Oh my goodness, she got so excited. She did around 7. She goes, oh, wow, here's what I've always thought with the podcast. It's all about before the episode goes live. And I went, whoa. She goes, what? I said, I'm just going to stop you there. You're hired. It was like a no-brainer. Yeah. So I hire for specific, not for tasks, but for areas of responsibility. So I have a VA that looks after all of my podcast stuff. So the marketing, the communication with it. I have somebody else where I know communication and content is really important. So I have somebody who is pulling apart some of the masterclasses I do, pulling apart some of the content and turning that into some written form. Then I go through that with my voice and make sure that it represents me, because it's taken from me anyway, put down into print. I just want to make sure it's not a word that I wouldn't normally use if they've paraphrased or something. I have somebody else who looks after my email marketing. I have a designer that's working on some side projects I've got, things like that. So it really is fulfilling an area of responsibility, and that way they have a clear direction of what they need to do and what they need to achieve.
I really like that. Question that I have: how have you trained them, especially as somebody who's like parsing content for repurposing?
Yeah.
How did you go about training that person to know what was important within what you said? What was the piece that was going to stand out?
Yeah. Early on it was, so I do a lot of videos. So in other words, I'll do a video masterclass, and then what I'll do is a video for them with my voiceover over the masterclass. So going, this is a key point for me right here, or the reason that this was important was X. And you don't have to do it with every piece of content you put out there or anything. But if you do that early on with a few pieces, they start to understand you. They get inside your mind. If they're good VA, they understand what's inside your mind and what you're trying to achieve with it. So it's being really transparent and clear with them. Don't assume that everybody automatically knows what you're thinking, because guess what? You're weird and nobody does. At least I've worked that out for myself. So don't assume they all understand that. Instead, paint them a picture for them and take them on the journey with you. And that way, when you go back to them, don't just go, no, I don't want this, or I want that to be changed to this. Tell them why. Give them the why. If they understand the why, they can do so much more.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've always wondered around that, just because I know for me, there are things like, also like my daughter is offered to edit video for me and things like that. And I'm like, and then she starts listening to it, she was practicing with one, and she's like, do I have to listen to the whole thing? I'm like, kinda.
Yes. Oh my goodness, I love that. Yeah. The other thing, by the way, that I do, this is a side for the podcast. So for example, I edit all my own podcasts, and which shocks a lot of people, but I love the process of editing. I'm an ex-sound engineer as well, so that kind of plays into it. But also I do it so I can re-listen to the whole episode. And because I actually get a lot, people don't realize this, I get a lot from the speakers, the guests that I have on the show as well.
Yeah.
They actually teach me a lot. I had one the other day where I wrote a page of notes afterwards, because I was like, I had never thought of this. I had never thought of that. That is brilliant. And that's why I get experts on the show. So by editing it, I get that value. But what I also do is I timestamp it. And I just go, oh, at 23 minutes and 10 seconds, that is a really valid point. And I wrote a quick note about what it is. And I can just pass that on to my VA and go, here you go. So we've put the episode live, but they can go through, listen to it, do the transcription, and then they can see that point at that time slot, that timestamp, and they can use that for some of the marketing.
Fantastic. That's perfect. That's perfect. So I want to go back a little bit to managing your time, and how do you do it all? Are there some specific, so I know you said this is a learning process, and I love that you've hired somebody to help you with that, right? To be able to point out those places, and you've given your family permission to call you on it when you're not, when you're going too hard, right? Because it's really easy when you love what you do,
100%.
to just keep doing it, to just keep so are there some specific boundaries that you've put in place around your time and your work schedule and things like that?
Oh yeah, if anyone can see my calendar, I have time blocks in my calendar that are not negotiable, and they are in the morning. So my wife, I drive her to work every morning. I don't have to, but I want to, so we can spend some quality time together. And sometimes we do these things called whimsical dates. So we'll be getting ready, and I go, hey, we're ready half an hour early. And she goes, yeah, let's do it. So we'll jump in the car, we'll drive into town, and then we'll stop and we'll grab a coffee together, and then I'll drop her off at work and head home. So that's not negotiable time for me. That's really important for me. That refills my cup. It helps me. But also in the evening, there's a time that I stop work. Now I stop work and then start work. So in other words, I work up until around about lunchtime every day, because I usually start around 2 a.m. So I work up until lunchtime. And then usually I get a phone call from my wife going, so what are you doing right now? I'm like, well, she goes, the correct answer is you're resting. Yeah, I'm resting. So I'll take some time for myself. I'll go for a walk or play some video games, do something that I really enjoy, And then in the evening, because my son gets back from uni, wife's back from work, I make dinner, and we sit down, we have dinner together, and we usually watch a couple of crappy TV shows. And then we get to the point where we're like, right, we're done now. And my wife will go, right, I'm going into the gym. So we've got a home gym here. She'll go into the home gym, and I'll go, right, there's a couple of things I just want to quickly push out. So I'll go and do some work and things. But it's pre-prescribed time. We know that at that time, you are deliberately and intentionally working, which means that you're not feeling that tension between, I should be spending time with the family, or I'm spending time with the family, I should be pushing that out, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. It's about being incredibly intentional with your time.
Thank you for pointing that out, because it's do a similar thing. There are times, okay, now that dinner or something like that, while y'all are doing that, or I'll just take it out to the kitchen table, and like that way I'm still in proximity, I'm around, but nobody's paying. My daughter's in her room, she's either doing homework or she's watching TikTok or whatever. And
usually my son's playing video games. I mean, he's 18, that's all he does. He goes out with his mates, plays video games, then goes, oh, fine, I'll tidy the house.
But there are times when like I haven't scheduled for that, or it's not like during an event like this, there's a big push. Obviously I'm working more. But most of the time I try to just stop when my daughter's off from school, or at least after dinner, like from the time she's off from school until after dinner, and then I might do a little bit of something. But I try to keep those things in the evenings, like the things that I could sit in front of the TV, be watching a show like Canva and things like that. The little fun things where you can just design something, right?
Yeah. That's a really good point, actually. Structuring your day around that is like understanding. I mean, everyone gives it names like your energy and all this kind of, but it's just understanding how your brain works is really important.
Yeah.
Like I know I'm hyper focused at 2 a.m. I'm hyper focused. I only sleep 4 hours a night. I've got this weird genetic disorder thing. So I wake up and I'm completely lucid and refreshed, which is super annoying for anyone around me because I'm like, hey, well, I'm alive. I'm awake. It's a great day. So I go, right, let's use that energy and focus on really intensive brain work. Like anything where I've got to write or I've got to actually think about things. Whereas in the evening, when I'm doing that, when my wife will jump into the gym, it's editing a podcast. Doesn't require me to think about it too much. Doesn't require me to do too much mental capacity. It just requires me to be paying attention, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to transition into your topic for today, because I'm excited to jump in. I'm really love this around vulnerability. And so, that superpower of vulnerability is a lot of us want to hide those things. There's a lot that we put walls up. We don't want others to know what we're going through, or we feel like we've got to present to the world that everything is always great and everything is always perfect.
I call it the Instagram filter of life.
Yes. Right. So tell us a little bit about the importance of allowing yourself to be vulnerable.
Oh my goodness. Well, the thing is, I mean, the first thing is we have to understand what vulnerability is. And as entrepreneurs, like we said, we often associate the concept of vulnerability with weakness, but it is most definitely not weakness. It's not frailty. It's not losing. It's not failing, anything like that. It literally is the courage to show up and be seen when you have no control over the outcome. So you are putting yourself in a vulnerable position. It's also the greatest measure of courage. And this is the thing that people miss. If you are, for example, you're going through a hard time, right? So you're in a vulnerable state, or you've been through something that makes you a bit vulnerable. You could either keep that very close and hide that, right? And think that that is a weakness, or you could have the strength, and the key word is strength, to go, you know what? I'm going to show up. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to show up. I'm going to be me. I'm going to put myself in a vulnerable state. And there's a reason we want to do that as entrepreneurs. There's a number of reasons. I'll talk about how the brain actually makes decisions and how this factors into that, which is a really big piece. And also the fact that it helps with basically building rapport with people. But more than all that, vulnerability is basically outside of your comfort zone. It's somewhere where you have no control over the outcome. And this is the thing, because this is what imposter syndrome does. Imposter syndrome goes, hey, Stephanie, guess what? You're at risk right now. You're out of your comfort zone. You're here where you're vulnerable, and I want to keep you safe. So your brain's going, I want to pull you into this safe space, and I want to keep you all locked up and all happy. Now, the problem with that is, as entrepreneurs, we know that what are the things that happen outside of our comfort zone? Breakthrough, success, prosperity, growth, learning, all of the things that we need as entrepreneurs don't happen in your comfort zone, right? It's very hard to prosper. It's very hard to succeed or break through something when you're staying safe all the time. You need to take risks. So this is why I love imposter syndrome. I love the concept of it, because people go, oh no, and I've dealt with imposter syndrome my whole life to a crippling degree sometimes, until I learned that imposter syndrome is literally just those signals from your brain to say, hey, guess what, Vince? You're exactly where you need to be right now. You're outside your comfort zone, and that's exactly where you should be. So showing vulnerability, or being vulnerable, is exactly where we should be as entrepreneurs as well, because that means that we are outside of our comfort zone. We have no control over the outcome. And that is where honestly, that's where the biggest opportunities are. That's where the things that you would never have seen if you were back here and safe happen, because you're like, wow, I was exposed to something that I would never have possibly seen before. But the other thing I love about vulnerability is what the power it gives to us as entrepreneurs to connect with our audience. And the best way I can give the example of this is, I love public speaking. I'm one of these rare people that my happy place is on stage. In fact, the more people I'm speaking to, the better. I love an audience. I love that feeling of like the movement of the audience, like when you say something funny and they all crack up laughing, you're like, yeah, I got you now. Or you say something that makes them go, ooh, you're like, yeah, that's it. You're pulling these strings. It's such an amazing feeling. It's awesome. But I got the opportunity to speak at a number of different conferences around the world. But one of them in particular was on stage with some other keynotes as well. One of them was Sir Ken Robinson, who is he was one of my heroes of public speaking. Like, the guy's a complete introvert. I'm not. He's a complete introvert, but he's so intelligent and speaks about epiphany and education system, and it's glorious. So I was like, well, there's no way I can compete with him. Then you had Michael G. Jones from Google. And I'm like, well, there's obviously no way I can compete with him with all the work that he's done. And we had all these other keynote speakers. So I'm feeling way out of my comfort zone right now. I'm about to go on stage. I had 5 minutes before going on stage, and I'm actually feeling nervous, which I don't normally feel when I'm going on stage, unless it's stand-up comedy, then I'm a wreck. Anyway, so I'm standing backstage and my phone rings, and it is my sister. One of my sisters. I've got 5 sisters. One of my sisters. Now, backstory on this: my sister grew up in the same horrible environment as me, and as a result, there were some life circumstances that happened that meant she got very badly hurt and thought that she would never ever be able to have children. Now, of all the people in this world that should have children, she is the one, because she was a natural mother. She mothered us as her siblings all through our childhood. She just loved children. She loved babies. It was like, I just felt like it was so unfair. So I'm standing there now backstage at this conference, about to go on stage, and I get a phone call from this sister, and she is in tears. And I'm like, oh no, what's happened? But then I realized these aren't bad tears, these are happy tears. And she let me know that she's pregnant. Because she got married to this guy. They thought they were never going to have kids. They've got now, by the way, 2 absolutely beautiful young girls. They're just amazing human beings. But she was letting me know that she was pregnant. I now am standing backstage, nervous to go on stage, but tears streaming down my face. I am so happy for my sister. I'm so overwhelmed. I can't even focus. And I'm like, wow, that's going to make a really interesting presentation. So I went out on stage, and I'm like trying to hold it together, and I'm trying to collect myself and go, right, because I'm teaching everyone about digital marketing. I'm like, okay. And I got up there, and I got to the mic, and I looked at the audience, and I realized I'm blank and I need to collect my thoughts. So I just thought, I'm going to own this.
Yeah.
I'm going to be vulnerable. So I said to everyone, look, if I look a little phased, a little dazed and confused, there's a reason for that. I just had a phone call from my sister. And I told them the story like I told all of you, my sister now, and I'm just so overwhelmed and so happy and so emotional. And I realized I had tears coming down my face while I'm telling them this. I looked down the audience, and even though there was bright lights, you can hardly see, but I could see the front row there, and there were tears streaming down their face. And I realized that this neural coupling had happened, right? So we talk about storytelling. Storytelling is incredibly powerful as an entrepreneur. Don't ever underestimate the power of telling a story. But when you tell a story to someone, they go on the journey with you. Their brain, it's been scientifically proven, their brain actually mimics the same patterns, the same activation, the same neurons fire as the person that's telling the story. So they are going on the journey with you. So I realized I had now created this neural coupling with this audience. So then when I finally, I gained my composure, and I was like, okay, right, well, now let's talk about digital marketing. I even brought my sister in as a couple of examples throughout the thing. I kind of ad-libbed a little bit and got a lot of laughs from everyone, etc. But I left that conference, and I'm incredibly competitive. So at these conferences, they always give you a rating of each of the speakers because everyone votes on them. And there was a survey and things. And I'm like, well, I just want to be in the top 5. And I got it back, and I was first equal with Sir Ken Robinson. And there's no way I was ever going to beat him. He was just so inspiring, But that was because I created a deep connection through showing vulnerability to the audience. By owning that. And I've seen this before. I've seen this with some of my clients. One of my clients went to do a Facebook Live, wants to throw up before going on camera because she's so nervous and hates it, and it's way out of her comfort zone, and she's incredibly vulnerable. But she shows up on camera and says, okay, just so you all know, I'm a wreck right now because this makes me feel very uncomfortable, right? I hate being on camera, but I want to turn up for you because this is important.
Yeah.
And the moment she does that, she triggers 2 things in them. One, a relatability. They immediately go, I relate to her because I'm like that when I go on stage, or I feel like that, or I couldn't do what you're doing because you're really strong. Yeah. But the other thing that happens as well is that relatability is they also then go, you've just talked about the fact that you've shown up irregardless because it's important. So I'm going to pay double, triple, quadruple attention to what you're teaching me now, or what you're imparting to me. So there's a neural coupling and a deeper way to connect with your audience just through showing that vulnerability. But also I want to get into the neuromarketing aspect of this, because when you understand how the brain makes decisions, like the brain has multiple different areas and all this, and honestly, it's super complex, fascinating, but super complex, because some parts of the brain actually serve multiple different purposes depending on what's happening in other parts of your brain. It's all related. It's complex. But what they've done is they've realized we can break the brain down into 3 core areas that are involved in decision making. So there is the reptilian brain, that is your defensive brain. So that is the thing that it's the part of your brain that reminds you to breathe and eat and look out for saber-toothed tigers and all those kind of things. Then there is the limbic system, which is the emotional part of your brain. And then there is the neocortex, which is the rational part of your brain. Now, whenever we're trying to sell whatever it is we're selling as entrepreneurs, whenever we're trying to promote whatever it is we're promoting, we always focus on the 2 areas of the brain, which is the neocortex. In fact, that's where we usually focus way too much, because we think that all those logical reasons, your benefits, your features, your pricing, all this kind of stuff, that's what's going to convert people. But in actual fact, it's not. They make the decision in the limbic system and the emotional thing of how they feel a connection to you, which again, vulnerability plays into that, but also what it says about them when they're aligned with you as well. They make that decision there, and then they justify it with the neocortex. They justify it with all the logical parts, the benefits, the features, all those kind of things. But we can't ignore that other part of the brain, which is the reptilian part. And that reptilian part of your brain is the thing that's there to keep you safe and keep you protected. Some people call it crocodile brain. If you hear it in marketing terms, they often talk about the crocodile brain. But essentially what it is it's not the part of the brain that makes a decision. So it's not saying, hey, Stephanie has this great offer. Yeah, hey, limbic and neocortex, we should totally do this. Come on, let's team up. Let's make this decision. That's not how it works. But what it does do is it opts you out of a decision. Where your limbic system's going, hey, this feels right for me. I'm feeling these vibes. Stephanie's legit. The neocortex is going, you know what? Her credentials are incredible. Yes, this makes perfect sense to me. But then the reptilian brain's going, yeah, I know, but she's a little bit dodgy, isn't she? Like, do I trust Stephanie? I don't know. She's looking at me a little bit funny. There's a defensive part of the brain that's trying to opt you out of that decision to keep you safe. Well, here's what happens when you show vulnerability. Because if you look, that part of their brain, of the person that you're talking to, the person you're communicating with, or is listening to your messaging, their part of the brain is looking for triggers to go, is this a safe environment? When you show your own vulnerability, that part of their brain goes, hang on a minute, this is a safe space. If they're comfortable sharing something that makes them vulnerable around me, then I don't need to be defensive. So the reptilian part of the brain goes, you know what? I'm just going to go and sit in the corner and have a cup of coffee, a whiskey, sit in fetal position. I don't care, but I'm not needed in this decision process right now. So that's why vulnerability as part of our sales tactics and marketing is incredibly important. You create that deep connection, that neural coupling. You create that with your audience. You create a deep sense of connection and empathy. In fact, you can even create a whole sense of what we call pseudo-social relationships. So these are the relationships that you have with, I'm going to use sports stars, but I don't follow sports. So it's a terrible analogy, but with celebrities, there we go. How many of us have celebrities where we're like, like for me, Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence, I just so want to grab those two and go and have a beer somewhere, because I know that we will get on incredibly well. I feel like I know that both of them really well, and I feel like they know me really well, even though, by the way, they've never met me. But it's a pseudo-social relationship because I've seen them be themselves. I've seen them in a natural environment, through blooper reels, behind the scenes interviews, all those kind of things, where they either they're really good at putting on a persona or they're just being themselves. But I find a connection to that, and I find this concept called a pseudo-social relationship. So therefore, it's a relationship that has very little risk, where I can be their friends. They don't even know I exist, but I can be their friends, but they don't know that they're not going to give me anything negative. There's no risk to me and things as well. So it's a really important relationship. So yeah, very, very powerful way to connect with your audience is through vulnerability.
And how does that allowing yourself to share stories, to share something, taking like an online business where you go, you finally launch the thing and nobody bought it. Right.
I feel like everyone's going, yeah.
Happened a couple times, right?
Just a couple, yeah.
You take that, at what stage? I think that's the question I have. when is it then that you share that with your audience? Because nobody's going to come hire me if I'm like, hey, I launched and nobody bought. I see you there though. Oh, I launched again. Yeah. And you still didn't buy anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah, man. If I went out there and told people, hey, trust me to teach you marketing, but by the way, I suck at marketing because no one signed up for my product, like that'd be terrible. Now look, the simple rule is whenever you're sharing vulnerability or showing vulnerability, there's a few things you need to take into consideration. First of all, you need to be actually comfortable with doing that, right? We're all about pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone, but not to the point where you feel that crippling fear and anxiety. You need to work on that. So for example, there's aspects of my past and my story growing up that I won't share because they're too triggering for me. They're too there's too much trauma tied to those kind of things. So I wouldn't share that. And also there's aspects of that I wouldn't share because like when you're talking about abuse as a kid and you're talking about, some of the things that your parents used to do, I discovered the hard way. I shared that with someone one day and I was like, oh yeah. And there was, and then I got shot or my hair got put on fire, all these kind of things. And then you look and you go, why have they gone green? And you're like, oh, they've never been exposed to this world. And I've just made them feel literally ill at what I've had to go through. So that wasn't constructive. So I always look at it through two lenses. One, are you comfortable sharing it? And two, what is the value that sharing it is going to add to them? So not all vulnerability needs to be shared. Like not all of the things you go through need to be shared. But I'll give you an example of this. I did a Facebook Live where I was talking about, funny enough, I was talking about vulnerability. I just realized I was talking about vulnerability. So I was talking to them about the importance of this. And I was saying to them about there are certain things that I feel really uncomfortable with, but they're really, really powerful, to share that. And it also happened to, by the way, coincide with International No Pants Day. So I was doing this Facebook Live, and at the end of that, I said, and by the way, happy International No Pants Day. I got up, walked to my cabinet behind me and got myself a whiskey in my boxer shorts. And it was cheesy. And it was like, they could tell that I was vulnerable and I was uncomfortable. And I thought it was such a cheesy thing to do, but I went back and I talked to them. That was about a year ago. I still get, in fact, we must be coming up to another one, but I still get people commenting about what they saw there because it made them go, hey, Vince is right. It really cemented home the power of vulnerability to see me then being vulnerable. So that was really interesting for them. The other one is I have a coach who I do a lot of work with, a very good friend of mine, and she was having a really tough time. And she just kind of vanished off social for a couple of weeks, which is very unusual. This is a very consistent entrepreneur. And I was like, I'm pretty sure she's not on holiday, so I'm going to reach out to her. So I sent her a message and said, hey, just checking in. I haven't seen you anywhere. You okay? And she replied and said, I'm okay. Which, by the way, if you know her, means I'm not okay. Please help. 2 words from her means like everything's in disarray. So I said, look, jump on a Zoom call. And she said, oh, I don't want to. I haven't done my hair and makeup. And I went, neither have I. She goes, oh, you jerk. Right. Fine. Jumped on a Zoom call. And then she just realized she was spiraling. And she just talked about the fact that she was really embarrassed about something that happened. And so what it was, just share it with all of you, because I go through this as well. But she was talking about the fact that she had a large corporate where she lives contact her and say, hey, we really want you to do this piece of work for us. We're going to pay you bucket loads of money, but put together a proposal and we'll get it over the line. And she goes, right, so I need to put together a proposal. At the same time, Forbes came to her, a reporter from Forbes, and said, we want to profile you. We want to do this big piece on you. Can you fill out all of this stuff? And she's like, sure. And then she realized, I'm overwhelmed. These are 2 big things. Her self-limiting beliefs and all that started to kick in. Imposter syndrome kicked in, and she didn't want to start either of those things. So she procrastinated. A week went by, she hadn't started either of them. 2 weeks went by, again, hadn't started either of them. Now she's getting emails and messages from both of those people. Then 3 weeks went by, and now she's into this shame spiral where she's incredibly embarrassed and ashamed about the fact that she didn't even start these things, and now is avoiding all contact with these 2 people because it would be embarrassing to admit that that's what's happened. So she told me all of this in a very vulnerable state. And my response was really simple. Oh, same here. She went, what? I said, oh yeah, I did this last week. And I told her about a similar story I had where a large insurance brokerage, funny enough, had approached me and said, look, we've gone to every marketing agency around and they're all going, if you want lead generation, there's only one person to talk to and he doesn't work in an agency or a corporate anymore. So go hire him quick. So they all came to me and said, we want your help. And I could see exactly what I needed to do for them. I was like, this is clear as day. Like they are going to make bucket loads of money from this, right? There's a very clear positioning they can take. and they wanted to pay me a huge amount of money to help them with this. And I said, sure. And it was only going to be 6 hours worth of work. This should have been a no-brainer. 3 weeks had gone by and I still hadn't started the report for the, not the report, the proposal for them. And the reason for that is I got in my own head and I'm like, what if they get this proposal and they're like, well, that wasn't what we wanted. Or man, we're used to getting the ones from the agencies. And I've never worked in an agency. I always resisted working at them because I don't like them. So she's like, they were like, I was like sitting there going, if they get this report, they're going to look at that and go, it's not what the agency would normally, the quality the agency would normally give us. So I was kind of stuck in this loop and I didn't do anything. And then I had to front up to them and say, actually, sorry guys, I got in my own head here. Here's what happened to me. And I told them exactly what had happened. I said, fully understand if you don't want to go forward this, but if you do, I'm here for you. And they were like, dude, get in our office right now. There's a whiteboard. We've got a whiteboard pen. Let's map out what we need to do and let's pay you this money. And I'm like, okay, simple. But by sharing that with my friend and realizing that we both go through that story, I helped to encourage her. I helped to lift her up. We then realized that we need to talk to more people about this. So by sharing that vulnerability with others, we actually made quite an impact on a number of entrepreneurs, because guess what? Just about all of us go through that crap, and just about all of us feel embarrassed and ashamed by it as well. So always think about, what is the purpose of sharing this vulnerability? What value is it going to add to the individual? Is it going to, basically, is it going to help them? Is it going to uplift them? Is it going to empower them? Is it going to encourage them? Or is it going to help to get them to know me a little bit better as well?
That's perfect. And I love the story that you just told, both yours and hers. I had a similar thing happen this summer. So
I'm pretty confident everyone listening to this right now can relate, and probably everyone's gone through the same thing, but it's so embarrassing. You don't want to admit it. And I didn't, I honestly, if it wasn't for the fact I was helping her, if I'm honest, I didn't want to share that either. I didn't want to really talk about that because I'm a very successful entrepreneur. I've built and sold many companies, and yet I can't put a proposal together. What the hell is wrong with me?
Yeah. I had to do I got to do a government proposal, a bid. They had put out an RFP, and or actually, and so anyway, doing the bid, and I had gotten so in my head, like, I've never done this. It sounds like it's gonna be hard. Like, and then I'm reading the questions, and I'm like, how do I describe what I do? I got words what I do.
Exactly.
Now I look at it and I'm like, I need to put that on my website. Like,
100%. And the funny thing is too, it's so much easier doing that for other people, but doing it for yourself, you're like, and I'm with you on that.
But I was in my own little spiral this summer, and part of it, but it was like I was spiraling before I knew what that quest was. What I back over, what am I gonna have to do? What am I gonna have to do? Am I gonna pass? Like, are they gonna accept me? Like,
Oh man, totally right.
I got the contract. I got the contract.
Nice. By the way, so did she, and she got the article in Forbes, which I was really proud of her. So awesome.
Yeah. This has been so good, Vince. I love talking to you, for one. You've been so much fun. And I know we had a lot of fun when I was on your podcast too. So I knew this was going to be great. Tell us.
I'm just selfishly using this as a chance to catch up with you. I mean, I know this is a summit, but I'm like, sorry everyone, but screw you guys. This is me and Stephanie hanging out.
Right. Exactly. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you and get a little bit of your expertise, how could they do that?
Well, I make that really hard. No, I'm kidding. I make it really easy. So just go to chasingtheinsights.com. That's my website. On there, you'll find, that's the home of my podcast. You'll find my podcast there. You'll find my books there. You'll find links to everywhere on social. And unless you're a spammer, don't reach out if you're a spammer. But if you're not a spammer, just connect with me everywhere. I'm always keen to meet new people. But you're also going to see a link on that website to book a free strategy call with me. And this is just my way of helping as many entrepreneurs as possible. So I give you 30 minutes of my time. We'll deep dive into any area that you're struggling. If you're not converting leads, you're not generating leads, you're going, Vince, I just need you to review my website, or I'm not sure about these design, whatever aspect it is. I've got 30 plus years in marketing. tap into that knowledge. I'll give you at the end of that, the clarity that you need and a roadmap forward of what you need to do. So just, yeah, go to chasingtheinsights.com. Nice and easy.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vince. I really do appreciate your time. And I know this has been enlightening and encouraging for everyone who watched.